All right, so we are officially live. Welcome to everyone joining in. This is a 20-minute live event series on our Salesforce Responsibly series. Joining me today is Ben McCarthy, all the way over from London. He is the UK Managing Director for Empower, and most famously known as the founder of SalesforceBen, one of the most, actually, I would say the most popular blog for all things Salesforce for all time. So welcome, Ben.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much for having me. Great intro.
Fantastic. And listen, Ben, you and I haven't got a chance to talk, and this time we're here to talk about, in 21 minutes, just quickly go over some key concepts. And today we're talking about user adoption. So the topics we're going to be covering today are: why is user adoption such a big challenge? What are some of the ways to identify if you're going the wrong direction with regards to adoption? Are there some good and simple initiatives that can be implemented with minimal buy-in? And then any advice on getting buy-in as an administrator from like an executive group, or just to try to get more adoption and going at it from that perspective. So before we begin, I just want to give a big shout out. If you're joining from our Fort Lauderdale Administrators Community Group, welcome, guys. If you're joining from the general Salesforce and YouTube world, welcome as well. So getting right into it, because we only got about 20 minutes to go. Ben, tell me, why is user adoption such a big challenge?
So I think it's first interesting to look at the different type of projects where you have user adoption issues. Because for example, in my experience with Empower, there are certain projects such as Service Cloud support, customer service projects, where you don't really have user adoption issues because they have to use the system in order to get the cases in and things like that. But one clear type of project where you see the risk is with sales. And using Sales Cloud, because technically they don't have to use Sales Cloud to do their job. They can do it over the phone, they can do it in a notepad, do it in Excel. And that's where the problem lies. It's identifying where those types of projects that cause the user adoption issues. And I think it's very important whenever you're doing those types of projects to realize the benefit that it's bringing to the users, and understand getting the users over to your side and understanding the value of implementing this system. Because I can think of one example where we already went into a organization that was using Sales Cloud, quite heavy users. They had about 100 sales users. And they were using Excel, they were using pen and paper, they were using every single system imaginable apart from Salesforce. And it's just because they had no enforcement from the managers, they didn't understand the value of it, and there was no real to them there was no real benefit from using the system apart from admin. So I think the main reason it has is the main reason people have user adoption is that users don't understand the value of Salesforce.
Right. And one of the things that it's very interesting in user adoption, and I'd be curious to hear about your side, is that I've come across several times companies struggling with user adoption where Salesforce wasn't a technical issue, but it was more of an accountability issue. Have you ever encountered a couple of times maybe that management just kind of like says, "Hey, I bought you guys the Ferrari, now go drive it," but there's no sense of accountability saying, "Hey, I'm looking at the task that you're entering in," or anything like that? Because one of the best examples for user adoption that I saw, and it was hysterical because I got invited to this sales meeting, and I remember 5 minutes before the sales meeting was starting, everyone was frantically like on Salesforce, like putting in their information and putting in their activities, because they knew the sales meeting, as soon as they started, they were just going to open up the dashboard and look at all of your activities, look at all of your opportunity pipelines. And if your numbers weren't there, you would get singled out in the meeting, because they were so hardcore dedicated, right, to holding people accountable in how they use the system. And have you had any experience with both ends of that spectrum? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the two ways to tackle it, right? You've got the one end of the spectrum where you're showing the users the value of using Salesforce. You're able to create tasks, you can upload documents, you can manage your pipeline, in the Lightning Kanban view, which is something personally that I do and I absolutely love it. Or you have the other end, which is it's kind of like carrot and stick, right? And you have the other end of the spectrum where you're you kind of want to, because you will be singled out in meetings, and your manager will have a go at you if they can't see those metrics in the weekly meeting. So, but I think both of them are very, very valid, because I think any organization that has spent all this money on Salesforce are going to want to have that holistic view of the pipeline, the forecasting, because otherwise, what is all this for? So I think both of those tactics are very valid. And something that I know that Salesforce use internally is I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's something that like the "don't be on this dashboard." So it's kind of like, have loads of different components of the people who have close dates in the past, or, other things like that. So if you appear on that dashboard, then you're in trouble. And it's a bit of fun as well. But I think both of those tactics are really, really valid.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to that. One of the best examples, this is a whole different customer. They had literally a chart on the dashboard that was called the doghouse. And it wasn't descriptive as to why, but you knew that if you messed up, you'd show up on the doghouse. And that was the chart that nobody wanted to be on. And that was a pretty, that was a
name
pretty
and shame.
One. Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. But, kind of jumping into that second point then, right? Because a lot of times people have this vision of getting into Salesforce. And certainly there's a lot of companies that say, hey, Salesforce is the name of the game. They've done a fantastic job for themselves. So many people are buying in. If I get Salesforce, I will be as successful in tracking my opportunity pipeline and tracking my efforts. But they just dive in head first with that logic without a whole game plan. So what are some of the ways, right, that a company can identify if they're going in the wrong direction with regards to adoption?
So I think it really depends. So I think if you're just implementing Salesforce, it's definitely the lack of user input throughout that implementation process. So that could be in the requirements gathering, or that could be during the build phase. If you're not having users or managers in those demo, or not even holding demo meetings or something like that, if you're not having users input throughout that process, then you're going to be in trouble, because the first time they're going to see it is in the training. And they're just going to identify lots of different issues with it, because it's been made with someone else's vision in mind, maybe a department head or the IT department or something like that. So I think if you don't have user input in the implementation process, then you're going to be in big trouble. But I also think if you've got an existing org, I think Salesforce have quite a good app exchange package called User Adoption dashboards or something like that. And I mean, that's a great way to see, how you're doing with user adoption, because it will give you metrics like how many people aren't logging in each day, and how many people aren't creating records and things like that, which will give you a pretty good indication of how your adoption is. So I think, depending on whether it's a new implementation or whether you've got an existing one, there are various ways to tell. But I mean, it's always going to come down to user input and how much you're engaging with the users, and how much are the admins actually sitting down with the users to understand how they like the system, what they like about it, what they don't like, what could change about it. So I think, the user is your customer as a consultant or an admin, and they need to be listened to.
Yeah, and funny enough, I was reading through some of the content on SalesforceBen on user adoption, and there was a really interesting quote, right? Because they were talking about, user adoption is more of a marathon, not a sprint. And, that rang so true for me on that, because it's not as simple as an implementation where you're done, you're live, and you walk away. There needs to be consistency and follow-up, right? And that's perhaps one of the reasons why it's so difficult, because it does take a lot of training and showing value, like you mentioned, because otherwise, people just say, why should I use this, right? Just so someone can get their reports. Like there's, and then ultimately people just start using it less, and there's no visibility on which direction you're going.
Yeah, and I think as well, you've hit on a really important point, which is Salesforce usually gets implemented by a consultancy. Maybe they do a little bit of user adoption, involve users. But especially if you're working with companies that are growing very fast, that kind of alignment with business and your business process and your Salesforce processes are going to come out of alignment very quickly if you're growing massively, new processes being implemented, things like that. And as Salesforce becomes more cumbersome to use because you haven't kind of matched up your business and Salesforce processes, the adoption will get less. And quite a lot of times we walk into these businesses that have already got Salesforce, but they're really struggling with user adoption. And it's just because no one, as you said, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and no one's paid attention to Salesforce after all these years. They've just implemented, thought it could kind of handle itself, not hired an admin. And then they're in this situation where the Salesforce is way out of whack with their business processes, and then they need to spend a whole more money hiring a consultancy to actually fix it. So, and that's why admins are so valuable, because they ensure that alignment between business and Salesforce.
That's actually the perfect segue for some of the next conversations, because I agree with you that admins are, there's that Spider-Man movie where like the boat gets cut in half. And like Spider-Man is there holding everything together, right?
Yeah, I haven't heard that one before, but that's a good comparison.
and I feel like a Salesforce admin is exactly that. Yeah. But at the same time, a Salesforce admin usually is in a position that holds a lot of weight. So it's, you're probably going to be under someone in IT or someone under sales or marketing, maybe operations. But at the end of the day, it's tough. I've heard a lot of times that it's tough to drive change as an admin because, again, you're not that high up in the pecking order. So, it's not like you can say something and then people will automatically do it. So I guess this kind of brings it to the third big point of the conversation here. What are some good and simple initiatives that an admin can implement without necessarily needing a lot of buy-in? If they are in a situation like you said, you're as a consultant, sometimes you're jumping in and the org is already super dirty. There's very little adoption. It's well past the implementation. What would an admin at a certain point be able to look at and say, all right, here's some things that I can probably do, right, to improve a little bit on my adoption, or one, get an idea, and then two, to improve.
So I think it's quite funny actually, because I can remember phone calls I've had from clients after Salesforce has been implemented, or maybe they've just had the demo from one of our consultants, and I get a phone call saying, I'm not happy at all. The project's not going well. I need you and the consultant to come over, and we need to sort this out. And then I actually get over there and they go, right, what's wrong? This field needs to go there. This needs to move over here, blah, blah, blah. And it's actually really, really tiny things. It's not like the entire process is broken and you need to start from scratch. It's that, I don't know, maybe something requires an extra click or something like that, and before it didn't. So I actually think that admins, because, small changes, are completely within their power, I would imagine, at most companies. I think they can actually have a lot of power by sitting down with users, understanding what they do and don't like, and maybe someone's using Excel and understanding why that is and why it's maybe too cumbersome to use Salesforce, and just slightly tweaking it. I don't think it's ever, maybe with some disastrous implementations, it's about a lot of stuff, but I think in most cases it's quite small things, and with a small bit of automation or a quick action, or changing the page layout to be more readable or something like that, can actually make a really big impact. And I think an admin sitting down with some users while they go about their day-to-day job, and then designing some solutions which aren't groundbreaking and need a whole load of budget and sign off, I think that's well within the capabilities of an admin to do that. So I think the small changes are where the focus should be first.
You bring up a very valid point, and I think it was on the Salesforce Admin podcast that I first heard this term. And I apologize if Jillian or Mike are listening to this, because I'm going to butcher the whole acronym, but it was SABWA. It was like something like Salesforce as you walk. And the whole concept behind it was to encourage admins to walk around the company and every now and then and see how users were actually leveraging the system, because sometimes, and I've seen this personally several times, you build Salesforce to be used in a certain way, but if you want to create an opportunity, there's 10 million ways that you can do so. You can do it from quick action, you can do it from a related list on an account page, you can do it from the opportunities tab, and sometimes you build this easy way of doing things, but users will find a different way of doing it, and you never know, and they say the system doesn't work or works poorly because they're doing it the hard way around. So it's really interesting that you shared that, because it reminded me of that, and I can relate to it. Yeah, 100%.
And I think there's also a lot that I really love how much you can, as a user, you can customize your interface now. You can change around the navigation bar. You can add in reports and dashboards as tabs, or new tabs that weren't there before, or change the comfy to compact layout. There's a lot you can do without even touching the back end of Salesforce. So just small things like that, I think are quite useful, and you only really understand what users want when you listen to them and sit down with them.
So for an admin that's listening here, right? If someone's watching now or if someone's going, I don't want to put you in too much hot water, but in here, at least in America, I'm sure in Europe there might be a similar saying, if not the same, but there's a saying that it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. Not sure if you're familiar with that one, but as an admin or as a consultant, and I've also done my fair share as an admin, sometimes I would do some work and take initiative in getting some work done and putting it out there for users to take a look at and validate. What's your opinion on that? Do you say, yeah, go for it, be daring and kind of, share with everyone? Is there a structure that you would recommend? Or, do you say, hey, make sure to, go through all the channels, or make sure to talk to people, proof of concepts on Sandbox first? Like, where do you lie on that spectrum?
Yeah, I need to be careful with my words now, because I might get loads of complaints after people's managers have been on them. But I mean, I think it depends. I think if you're at a larger company and you're in a team of admins, I think you're going to have a structured process for deployment and changes and things like that. So that will hopefully be a bit more defined. But I think there's going to be a lot of solo admins out there listening to this, and I've been in this position before. And I think to some extent you have free reign to kind of I don't know for all companies, but I kind of had free reign to do whatever I wanted to do. So, I made quite a lot of changes without getting it formally signed off and things like that. But, I was sensible about it. I wasn't drastically changing anyone's processes or the way they worked, but just implementing quick fixes that didn't impact too much stuff. So I don't want to give a specific answer to that, but I think it really, really depends. But I think, as long as you're sensible and you're not, you make the relevant people informed by what you're doing, maybe sales director or customer support director or something like that, then I think changes within reason can be done without going through, a huge process.
Yeah, and funny, listening to you talk and give the explanation and everything, I think as a consultant, I've been in that situation where I am in that situation. I have companies that I definitely have some free reign over, and I have some companies that I have to be very careful, and there's a specific process to follow. I think one of the things that I've learned was that certainly setting the expectations right from the beginning, right? And making sure that hey, I'm going to be doing this or releasing, kind of making sure that at least everyone understands how you act or what the company policy is, right? Because several customers that I have free reign with, they actually encourage it. They like that we're quick to doing things and just jumping on. So, at least for me, setting the right expectations was something really big. I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that, but it was just a thought that occurred to me as you were giving your explanation.
Yeah, no, I think, setting expectations, and, I think there's extra stuff, like obviously proper deployment process, Sandbox, UAT, getting users to test things for automations and things like that. But also documentation as well. If you do have free reign and you're not documenting anything, then, when you do leave this company or, someone else joins the team, it's going to be very, very hard to unpick what someone else has done. So, yeah, I think there are a few things, even if you've got free reign to, just make sure you're following.
No, I think that's a fantastic point. Yeah, that's definitely something that can't be overlooked, because a lot of times, right, people leave the company and they were the Salesforce general, and they leave, and everyone's kind of left hanging, not understanding, where things are. And, as consultants, we may be able to dive in and kind of reverse engineer things, but it still is a considerable amount of time to understand what was going on in someone's mind when they were building things in a certain way.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're coming here to the end of our 21 minutes. Any final advice, that you would want to give in terms of trying to get some more buy-in, or like, an aha moment that you'd like to share?
So I think there's more buy-in from management. I think when you're doing that, there's a couple of things that management really understand, and that is revenue, increased revenue, saving money, as well. I think that's the main one. That's why people buy Salesforce. They want to increase their revenues. They want to save on manual processes and things like that. And I think any way that you can help people do that by cutting down salespeople's time on admin. So CPQ is a great example of that. If salespeople are spending an hour creating a really complex quote, CPQ could cut that down by maybe 80–90%. And they could be spending time actually selling instead of putting together these quotes. So I think any way you can massively save people's time, which can indirectly affect increased revenue by salespeople spending more time selling, I think that's a great way to get in buy-in, and user adoption ties into that. But I also think management also want to see reporting. They want to see pipeline. They want to see forecasts, and all of that is driven by user adoption and data being entered into Salesforce. So if that isn't there, there's a big issue, and the amount of money that people are spending on Salesforce is going to be wasted. So I think when looking for buy-in and maybe budget to get extra tools or some development or something like that, focusing on things like reporting and saving revenue or indirectly increasing revenue is really important. And there's also a lot of other elements that come into it, like AI is becoming such a big thing in the Salesforce world now. Like Salesforce Einstein opportunity scoring has just become free, and that needs to be driven by a lot of data. And if your company is looking at purchasing stuff like that or using AI machine learning to get ahead of the game, it's not going to work if you haven't got the data there, and you're not going to have the data if you haven't got the user adoption. So I think those are a few extra important things to be getting buy-in at the moment. Yeah,
and I think that's a fantastic conclusion. Certainly, there's tons that we can keep going. I feel like this is a conversation we could pop open a couple of beers and keep the conversation going. But on that, Ben, I really appreciate it. It's the first time that you and I are getting a chance to talk, but I definitely enjoyed the conversation with you. You are welcome back whenever you want, and we can get some more conversations going. Really appreciate you making the time to join in. And maybe a good way to close this, since we talked about the Spider-Man analogy, was that I think Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility. So with the great power of Salesforce administration, it comes with there's definitely the need to Salesforce responsibly, as the series is called, and always try to strive to make sure that you build a great Salesforce org for your team. So listen, Ben, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone that's watching, and we'll be keeping more of these coming, so keep an eye out. But until then, like and subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and we'll see you in the next time.
Thank you. Bye.